are listening to Inside Voices on WNHHLP 103.5 FM.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Inside Voices. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am thrilled, as always, to be joined in these wonderful conversations about the world of childcare. And I just want to give you a couple of a backdrop before we get started in this conversation with these two wonderful women that we have sitting in front of us. The past legislative session allocated about $80 million to facilitate the upgrade, expansion, and construction of childcare facilities across the state. This is a part of this major investment that Connecticut is doing to improve the early care system. And prior to that $80 million investment, there were some funds set aside, about $10 million that was set aside, that was used to create infant toddler spaces, but also to improve childcare facilities across the state. We are actually going to be joined by LISC, the organization that is in charge of managing these funds on behalf of the Office of Early Child Education, in our next conversation. And prior to that, we are going to be talking to Miss Alicia Brown and Loretta Satchel about their journey in receiving some of these LISC funds. So LISC had about $10 million that they made available to several childcare, existing and new childcare providers across the state. And a lot of people are going to be on a childcare journey, we hope, in helping to start childcare centers and helping to improve or to expand their childcare facilities. Hope for New Haven, which manages Hope Child Development Center, will certainly be one of them. And we are joined here again by these two ladies who will become a part of the different program offering that Hope will be providing to the community. And the reason for having this conversation, I think it's so important because so many people are going to join or are going to start this journey of starting a childcare center. And certainly in our role as Circle, which is the other organization that I co-founded, we have been charged to support individuals in the community to help them in their childcare entrepreneurship journey and to help them set up childcare facilities across the state. And their folks are just never prepared for what is to come when they start a childcare center. And so this is why I think this conversation is so important and it's so relevant and timely, because here are two women who took on a journey themselves on behalf of their church, Revival Church. And this has been a journey that's been eye-opening for them, that has stretched them. I think, is that fair to say that this has stretched you?
Very fair.
Absolutely.
That you didn't anticipate. And I have to tell you, Alicia and Loretta, this is so familiar. Your journey and your story is so familiar because I've worked with so many other individuals in the community that wanted to start a childcare center. Some are successful and others are not. And you, I would put in a success category because you are on the precipice of launching a center. And full disclosure, Hope Child Development Center will be licensing your center. And the name of the center will be Legacy Learning Lab. And we're going to talk a little bit towards the end about what we hope to accomplish with a Legacy Learning Lab. But before we jump into all of that, let me introduce first Alicia, because you're up first on my screen, and then Loretta. Welcome first and foremost, and just introduce yourself to the audience, please.
My name is Alicia Brown. Just a little history about myself. I spent 20 years or so in family resource centers in New Haven. I was preschool teacher for about 5 years, and I taught second grade for about 3 years before joining this wonderful adventure here.
Okay, thank you. Loretta.
A little bit about myself. I am currently retired. I took on this assignment as a way to fulfill some of my time. I worked for the state of Connecticut for over 25 years as a program administrator. I then went on to work for the Windsor school system, working with little people, and that's how the interest of this occurred. I'm currently doing contracts for the state of Connecticut in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I enjoy policy and procedure, and that is my area of expertise. And I'm looking forward to seeing the end result of this venture, the Legacy Learning Lab, and what it brings to the New Haven community and the families we serve in that area.
So you guys mentioned all of this great experience that you have working in Family Resource Center, working in the school system. Did any of that prepare you to start as a childcare entrepreneur? Anyone?
I would say yes. Part of our mission with Family Resource Center is to work with home daycare providers. That is a mandate from the state of Connecticut. So there were certain things that we would do, programs we would put on for home daycare providers, bringing in people to speak and to let them know programmatically things that they need to have in terms of licensing, maintaining those licenses. So yes, my work has prepared me, and also working in the classroom, no experience like right there on the ground. So my work experience has definitely gave me a little bit. I didn't know a lot, but definitely gave me a leg up on this process.
What about you, Loretta?
Like Alicia as well, my work experience afforded me the opportunity to work with a diverse group of people, meaning the children, families, and also as an administrator to work with staff and contractors throughout the school system and the state of Connecticut. That experience alone helped prepare me for this journey. Had I not had that experience, I would not have been able to work with such a diverse group of people in this process.
And I think it's important to highlight, because I think for a lot of folks, a lot of folks may be coming from similar background, and a lot of that prepares them to be in the classroom and prepares them to operate a center, but it's a very different journey from being in the classroom, working in the classroom, and setting up a center, right? And
Absolutely.
that is a huge hurdle for many in our communities to overcome. And we have wonderful people who have they're great assets in the classroom, but their journey to set up a center just doesn't really match with what they had initially anticipated it was going to be. And that's really where we want to kind of jump in, that kind of work that you had to engage in and what you learned through the process. So before we get started, you all decided that you were going to, as a church, to start this childcare facility. But you and Alicia, and I have to say Cynthia Ely, who was supposed to be with us today, she's ill, so she couldn't be with us. You guys have been the one that has been the primary force in this work. Obviously, there were other folks involved, but you were the one sort of like project managing this process. So talk to us about the LISC grant application process, because I imagine that for many people, that will be the first place that they will go. We hope that will be maybe the second place they'll go. Maybe the first place they'll go is to an organization like a Circle or an All Our Kin to find out what the process should be and where we can find financing. But you guys had a leg up in that you knew about this grant opportunity. So can you talk to us about what that was like applying for the grant? So, Loretta, were you intimately involved in applying for the grant?
I was involved, but here's the place where I have to give most of the credit to our project manager, Daryl Brakeem. He was the person who had the bright idea to get this off the ground and started, and collectively pulled us together to see it to its end result. He did the legwork for the initial process for obtaining the grant.
Okay, so what role did you have? And for folks, they may be very familiar with Daryl Brackeen's name. He was a former alder in New Haven. He's off into a better life now, a better world. Is he in Delaware? He's in Delaware, right? He's moved on to Delaware with his family, and he's still involved in this process. So yeah, so Daryl was integral in helping with this process. But what role did you all play during that time?
I mean, we did a lot of reviewing of materials that was written for the grant. We were able to submit our ideas along in the format. We did a lot of brainstorming and obviously rewrite till we thought it was perfect. And then obviously to the submission. And Daryl also collaborated with his team of folks to ensure that the grant was written appropriately and that we would be successful in obtaining it. And here we are.
And you guys were incredibly successful because you secured how much in funding?
$359,000.
And so that's a lot for this grant. And not only did you secure it, you secured it to actually start a center. I do know that a lot of the funding went to programs that already existed. So you guys must have had a phenomenal grant to get that level of funding and for that level of trust for you to start on this journey. So you received 300, it was a 350?
359.
59. Okay, I don't want to shortchange you all. So it felt to me when I was talking to Daryl that he felt very confident that you guys were going to get this grant. Did you have that sense, Alicia and Loretta, that you guys were going to be successful?
Well, the area where the daycare is located at on Legion Avenue, 392 Legion Avenue, it is a high needs area. So we were confident after doing some reviewing that we would be able to get the grant just because of the need. And it's, there's a need throughout the city, but that's a very high need area.
Yep. And what about you, Loretta? How was your confidence in securing these funds?
I had high confidence that we would be successful. Normally you follow in the footsteps of who is leading you at the time. And Daryl was pretty certain that we would be awarded the grant. And so we just followed in his footsteps, and here we are today.
Good for you guys, because, and of course, we're going to talk to Lisk about it, but and I don't know the number off the top of my head. I'm sure Lisk will be able to share, but clearly we had $10 million. And I think that request for grant funding far exceeded that $10 million. So good for you all for having that level of confidence that you would be successful. Full disclosure, we did also secure grant funding to build our playground, or to rehab our playground. So you received the grant funding. What was the next step?
We had to determine who was going to carry out our vision of that space most effectively. So we began to interview architects to see what they thought of the space. It was about 3,500 square feet. And then we had all of these requirements that we wanted this 3,500 square feet to meet, and who would be able to present us with the best floor plan for the space and do it in the price that we needed them to do it in. So that was our next big challenge.
How many architects did you guys interview?
We interviewed 3 companies.
Okay. And I imagine for many folks who are starting this journey, that is going to be one of the critical thing because of course you guys had 359,000 and you had to do everything out of those funds, right? And when we heard from Lisk, again, a lot of some of the challenges that people had was finding the right people to help them to bring this vision forward. Did you feel that you had the right person?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so you found the architect. Alicia, how involved were you in thinking through this process? Did you guys have an idea in mind, and did that idea evolve, or did you come in just open to the architect's ideas and presentation of what the facility would look like?
I did not have an idea in mind. I think there were some plans that were presented um, that may have been beyond the scope of $359,000, but it did help to lay the groundwork for what it would look like or what it could be. Because it was being converted from a church to a daycare, my limited vision, I definitely could not like fully envision what it would look like as a daycare.
Okay. And then, so I know because I was brought in to consult on this work, right? And I remember when I was sitting with you guys, we were talking about what the needs were. How familiar were you with what was required for licensing and what was required in terms of spacing for a childcare center? And either one can answer.
Once the material was reviewed, I became more familiar. In my past work, I have gone through 4 accreditation processes. So the licensing process was very similar to what I had already experienced through the state of Connecticut. And I said, I've been through processes where you had to meet 459 standards. I said, this is not going to be that difficult. And of course, after meeting you with your wealth of knowledge and experience, I was certain that we would be able to get to the finish line in terms of licensing.
So were you guys pleased with what the architect came up with? Or were there things that you wish that I know, Alicia, you said you didn't really have anything in mind, but were there things, Loretta, that you envisioned that just the reality just didn't make it so?
It was, if I'm being transparent, it was a very difficult process because our funding did not match our desire and our dreams. And how you put those two together is something else. It was definitely a process. So at the end of the day, we took what the architect drew for us and made it a reality. And it was definitely a process. There were some days we were like, this might not happen. And then there were other days where we were more optimistic and relied a little bit more on our faith that because we desired this not so much just for the church purposes, but we desired it for the community that we would be servicing, we had to make it happen. Did we have to make some changes that we did not want to make? Of course we did. But at the end of the day, we have the best product and we will provide the best service with what was given to us.
And I will say, if I can cut in, I can't tell you how many times Miss Loretta told me that I could not have walls because of the budget. Short walls, how about 4 feet walls? So this is an open concept, which is very different from anything that I've ever seen. But at the end, as the furniture started coming in, I was really able to see it. Like now I can see it. I'm really excited about it. But during the process, I can't count how many times she said, "You're not getting any walls."
And I think that's so important to highlight because one, I don't think enough people utilize an architect when they're getting ready to start, especially people, in our community, because again, it takes resources to do this, right? And I think for a lot of folks, they have an idea of what they want, but their budget doesn't match there's not sufficient money in the budget to bring that about. And I think this is why some of us, some of the folks that I've seen that I've worked with, they kind of take a shortcut to get to that place. So talk about that internal conflict that you had to deal with letting go of certain things. Clearly, Alicia, it was harder. It seemed that it was harder for you to let go of certain things than Loretta. Loretta seemed very circumspect. It was just like, this is what it is. It's just going to be what it's going to be. So talk to me about what that journey was like to have to let go of what you initially envisioned to what you ended with.
It was a little frustrating for me because, like, I was really married to the idea of having some walls. Like, Miss Loretta, I found a place in Canada. She's like, Alicia, we're not going to Canada to look at a daycare. You're not getting walls. So that was probably the most difficult part for me. When I started teaching in a classroom, it was like every little sound was just like, oh. So I just could imagine 40, small people in an area, in an open area. And I was like, it's not going to work. But again, I see it now. So.
Okay. Loretta, how did you get to that place where you were just like, we're just not going to have walls and other things, I'm sure. What was the journey for you to get to that place of acceptance?
It might have been, no, I know it was a little easier for me because I was involved in the building of an 88-bed facility in Hartford, Connecticut for juvenile justice. Mm-hmm. And I was able to see an $80 million project that had to have cutbacks. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about 359,000, I said, there's going to be some cutbacks. But what I want to mention is some of the things that we had to go without on the beginning process doesn't mean that those things cannot happen as things move along. I want to have the temperature check at the door where you put your face in and the temperature comes up and it releases the door. I can't have that today at the lab, but that doesn't mean as the lab grows and becomes profitable that those things like, the automatic wash sink when you stick your hands in the water. Because Alicia and I did visit several places to look at different setups because you don't know exactly what you want unless you've looked at other places and said, yeah, no. So I'm also a believer that in the end, some of the things, not walls, Alicia, some of the things that we desired that we couldn't have on the onset will occur as time goes by.
I think that's such an important perspective because I think in this microwave type society, we want what we want when we want it and we want it now. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs who, especially those who have limited resources, get into that place of acceptance that, you may not be able to get it right now, but that doesn't preclude you from getting it in the future. So I think, again, you guys have really great preparation in going through this process. So for someone, let's talk about some of the key financial considerations. We talked about the fact that you had a $359,000 budget. That's much more than many folks in our communities will have access to. And you said that wasn't sufficient. I didn't think it would be sufficient either. But what were some of the key things that you guys had to make sure that you factored into this budget?
Alicia, you want to answer that?
Clearly the architect.
The architect, the contractors with an S.
Furniture.
Furniture. Yeah.
For sure. The playground was a major one.
What about some of the regulatory things that you guys had to undergo? Because I'm pretty sure you had to engage with the city in this process. So were there financial considerations as it related to the city?
Absolutely. All of the permits that had to be obtained were costly and time consuming. And I guess we'll talk about that later. further down in our questions.
Let's talk about that now. So, what were some of the costs that you guys had to factor in as it related to the permits?
Well, we actually allowed the contractor to be responsible for gaining the permits and spending out of his budget. So we didn't actually face that directly, but the time that it took to get the fire department, the plumbing, the electrician, you have to factor all of those things in because that actually impacted the bottom line timeline in terms of being completed. So
what were the time frame? What did you initially anticipate as a time frame for that specific part of it, and what did it turn out to be?
Well, you would make a request and you would think within 7 to 10 business days, you would have your request answered, whether it was positive or negative. But in turns, it was several weeks for some of these things to come through, which you couldn't move forward unless you had their approval. So that just really delayed the process.
So what would you, for somebody who's getting ready to start this journey, what advice would you give them around starting in that process?
Do your homework, research what it takes, what it costs, who the contact person is, be familiar with the forms and what the requirements are. It's those basic things that are going to help you along the way.
Did your contractors help you with that? It sounded like they did.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, the architect also helped because he was very familiar with people in those positions in the city because he had worked with the city for so long.
Yeah. Alicia, do you have any insight, any advice?
It would be the same. Do your homework. And I was just thinking, plan before you plan. Have a plan for your plan. So if someone wanted to, open a daycare, say next year, like start now working on all the things. Don't have an idea that, we'll take 90 days or, 6 months or whatever. Like make time, extra time, over plan, I would say.
I've worked with other folks who did not utilize architects and they didn't utilize contractors to do this. And this is part of the reason why they get into a lot of trouble. What were some of the pitfalls that your architect or your contractor, and the contractor is so important. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that because that, when we talk to LISC, they also mentioned that people got into a lot of trouble with their contractors. And a lot of times when I've worked with people when I step in, when somebody is in a crisis, it's usually around the contractors. So what are some of the pitfalls that your architect and your contractor helped you, or you may not know if there were pitfalls that you would have fallen into, but can you identify something that you were grateful to have them there for so that you didn't have to manage or deal with it, or that prevented a potential crisis in your planning?
In terms of our architect, he did exactly what we asked him for at the end of the day. We did have to go back and forth in terms of his original drawings, but he, at the end of the day, gave us exactly what we needed to move forward. In terms of our contractor, I believe the same is true. Although we're about 90% at the finish line, if I had a redo, and I know that's not a part of your questioning, I would be more specific with the contractor. I need lights this week. I need plumbing this week. I need my countertops this week, instead of how long do you think this whole process is going to take and have a finish line date. I would be more specific in terms of a schedule and have an on-site person from my camp in that process.
And Loretta, I think a lot of times that is, that aspect of this work doesn't really get highlighted a lot, that, you really have to kind of become the expert to kind of oversee the experts. To talk a little bit more about why you say that this would be you would approach it differently.
Just because you have in your mind, your team has in their mind when the final date is set. And then when you realize the final date is not the final date, and you get to that next date, and then that's not the final date. But if you had started with an original contract that had specific guidelines and you had that person on site making sure those things happen, then you wouldn't run into those pitfalls, or they would be less likely, because pitfalls are going to happen. You're going to have, like I said, I was there for an 88-bed facility being built. We had some setbacks and we had a lot of money. So in this process, I expected some pitfalls, some delays, especially with the permits not being done in a timely manner, when funding doesn't come when exactly you want it to come. Although List did an outstanding job getting us this money once we started this process, but that too was a process. Mm-hmm. So for me, the schedule of events is the biggest thing in terms of setting that up with your contractor, because that also affects your bottom line. You know, you think you're going to open a daycare center, September 1st, and then it's going to be January 1st. Well, you lost some money, in that gap, and you lose opportunity because, everybody's not looking for childcare January 1st like they are for August or September. And I get that. So that schedule is key. Definitely key.
Yeah. I just want to circle back to your question about the architect and the contractor, how important it is. I know when we were working around our handicap accessible bathroom, we had a thought in mind of having 2 entrances, and it was, framed out and set to go. And when the architect came, he said, "Oh, this is not going to work because of the regulations." So had he not been there, it would have been framed and set to go, and we would have found out after it was done that that was not acceptable. So it is important to have your contractor and your architect, because they know codes that we wouldn't know.
Yeah. And so if I'm hearing you correct, the big advice that you would give to somebody who's starting this journey is, 1, get a good architect that has connections with the city. That would be helpful. Get a good contractor as well, and definitely lay out clear timelines for when things need to be done.
Very absolutely. In writing.
Absolutely. And I would add the educational consultant piece too, because all the pieces work hand in hand. What an architect and a contractor thinks is appropriate might not be appropriate from the educational consultant or the OEC standpoint. And that collaboration needs to work as well.
And talk a little bit more about that, because I also know I'm called into a process when things sometimes are going wrong, rather than coming in at the very beginning. And you engaged me at the very beginning, and I can talk about, the perspective I gave. But how was having an educational consultant important and critical to the process for both of you?
Very important for me, because as I said, like when I worked in preschool, it was, a million years ago, when we didn't even really have a curriculum. It was kind of teach the children what you think they should learn kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, that's not the case. So having that consultant, having someone to say, these things you ordered will not work out. Like, would have been great if I had consulted ahead of time before I started ordering. So absolutely important to have a consultant on hand as you start out, because what we think may be acceptable may not be, especially if you're looking at, home daycare provided, opposed to a center base, which those regulations may be a little different.
Mm-hmm. Loretta?
The person we have to work with just had a wealth of knowledge and understanding of what needed to be done, and gave freely. You know, a lot of times when people have information and expertise, they're not willing to give freely. In our situation, we wanted to work smarter, not harder. So if someone had been through the process and knows what needs to be done and is willing to sit at the table with you at whatever that cost is, it's a wise thing to do. We knew that we could not do that process without an educational consultant. Without you being around, a lot of things would have gone left. And we're thankful for that piece that you imparted in the beginning and continue to impart, because it has made our lives a little bit easier. Because you're tough too, but it made our lives a little bit easier.
Then we want the best for our children. And so, yes, we are going to demand high quality work and high quality product for sure. So looking back at the startup process, this journey, what would you say was the most surprising thing?
I think the time, for me, the time that we had in mind versus the time it actually took, that's extremely surprising. And I think different people on the team may have had different thoughts. So some may have thought like, this is going to be 90 days. This process is, we're going to get in here, we're going to revise this space. This won't take that long. I thought it would be a little longer, but certainly not as long as it has taken. So that was really surprising to me, and the costs really. Things, are not the same price as they used to be. You're talking about wood, you're talking about labor, all the things that go into it. Very surprising.
Okay. Loretta, what was surprising to you?
The overall process. I've learned so much. I don't care if you are bright and have a level of expertise in things. This was a different kind of process. And no regrets at all, but you gotta kind of be 10 different people. Today your focus is, oh, those sinks not gonna work. Well, let's go look at some new sinks. Oh, you put that door, this paint color, this not bright enough for the kids, I don't think. So you've got to be everything, and you can't take it personal. And I stress too, the team that you work with got to be cohesive. Otherwise, this whole process does not work.
Yeah. I think, again, we are going to have a lot of people undertaking this journey to become childcare entrepreneurs. And I think it's so important for them to fully understand what this journey is. You guys are still in the process, right, of getting everything done. So can you talk about where you are in this process?
We are almost at the finish line where we have, like Loretta said, it's about 90% done. Just a few more things to do on the inside, and I guess the outside will then be the next challenge. But the inside should be done this week.
And Loretta, for you had a process working with a much larger facility with the state. Alicia, you didn't have that as a part of your experience.
No.
So what advice would you give to a person who is starting this journey? I think we kind of touched on those, but I think I want to give you an opportunity to say, what advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about starting this journey of becoming a childcare entrepreneur? What advice would you give them in the startup and the construction and the launch of a project like this?
Well, I would say, as Ms. Loretta said, to get a team. Like, don't try to do it by yourself. Just don't. I don't care how much experience you have in the classroom, working in the setting. It's not the same as starting your own. So, to do your homework for sure, and then get a team, get a mentor, get someone that can tell you all the things that you will need to know, because people will say, like, let me know if you have any questions, but very often you don't even know which questions you should be asking. You just don't know until you come to it, and then you're like, now what do I do? So I think having a mentor, having a team, other people who can field some questions that you're not thinking about, will be very helpful on the journey.
Okay. Loretta, what advice would you give to someone starting this journey?
I would say the same thing that Miss Alicia said, as well as your project manager. We would not be where we are today had Daryl not taken the role that he took with our team. We were sad to see him go to JP Morgan Chase, but happy at the same time because we knew that that was an outstanding opportunity, not only for himself, but to his family as well. We wish that Daryl was physically here with us throughout the whole process. But when I tell you he was a phone call away, I said, I know you working for them other people right now, but I just got one question. And he would be there. And if he could not answer and tell me what to do at that time, he would circle back around after 5 p.m. and let me know what the steps were. So I say all of that to say the project manager needs to be a strong person with the wealth of knowledge in collaboration with that educational consultant. I mean, those things are key. And go out there and look at stuff that already exists. I think that was really beneficial for Alicia and I to see other centers, meet other directors, to hear their true voice. They were like, oh yeah, 10 to 12 hours on the onset. We was like 10 to 12 hours. Yeah, that startup, you're going to be there. To hear that in real time and real talk was also very important.
So for many folks in our community, they don't necessarily, or they won't necessarily have those resources available to them. And they're going to be making choices based on an even smaller budget that you guys had. So in light of that, with somebody with a limited budget, what advice would you give to that person? Would it still be the exact same advice, or would you, or just what would you advise that person who doesn't have that type of budget?
I would suggest that a person connect to a place like Circle or All Our Kin, or an agency that knows what would be required, and maybe some ways around the things like, you don't have the finances to support this, maybe they can offer something, maybe they have a connection or can connect you to a network where you're able to get these resources that you need for low cost or no cost.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Loretta?
Agreed. And the internet now, that wasn't the thing back in the day, but you can Google anything and come up with as limited or as expansive as you want it to be just by going on the internet and doing a Google search.
You mentioned that you guys visited other facility. One of the things that we heard from providers a lot of times when they approach an organization like Circle is that they feel afraid to reach out to other daycare directors or providers to get resources. And you say, Loretta, that not a lot of people are necessarily free and open with resources. So, how did you get into those spaces to see other facilities? And what was that like? Did you cold call people, or did you have relationship with people?
We had some relationships, and Miss Alicia was looking for childcare for her grandson, so we used that as well.
Yes. Definitely use that one to get in. Like, oh, let me ask you some additional questions. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we're community people, so people who had daycares that were in our circle already, we just reached out and just said, can we come spend a day? And then that day turned into, oh, we're going to come back next week because we want to see this process. And so it worked out to our benefit.
Yeah, and we do want to let people know that, again, there are organizations that are available to support if you're looking to start a childcare center. The Women's Business Development Center is a major organization that can help you, and that should be definitely one of the first stop. Not only do they have funding for startup, they have funding for emergencies, funding for expansion, and they also offer that business management piece. We certainly work with the Small Business Development Center, SBDC, which is another organization that folks can reach out to that can also connect folks to the Boost Fund. And definitely organizations like Circle, All Our Kin. If you're a family childcare provider, the Staff Family Childcare Network. The one for New Haven is Connecticut AUIC. So you can certainly reach out to those organizations to do it. And of course, LISC, who will be on next, will be a huge and major resource for folks. So as we get ready to wrap up our conversation, let's talk about what the center is going to entail. And I know the center, the vision for the center has evolved a bit, and it's going to be working to support individuals who themselves are looking to become childcare business owners and entrepreneurs themselves. So well, first of all, let's talk about where the center is located and how many children the center we hope to be licensed for.
The center is located at 392 Legion Avenue. It is in the former space of Mount Calvary Holy Church, again, converted to daycare. And we hope to serve 40 children.
And what's the age group of those children?
Originally targeted toddlers. We went back and forth with this many, many times, but 12 months to 3 years is the target, but that can change and evolve just as the center has evolved over time.
Okay. And Alicia, you're going to have a unique role in this center. Hopefully, we can hold on to Miss Loretta and have her provide her expertise in her semi-retirement. But you're going to be in a specific role when the center launches. And what's going to be your role and title?
My role will be director. Thank you. Thank you. So that is an exciting change for me. Again, from working Family Resource Center, working with home daycare providers and seeing, the need, the educational need, all the things that go into providing, they have requirements that they need to meet yearly from first aid, CPR, professional development, all the things that were needed. Now I'm going to be like on the ground, like at the top of the food chain, so to speak. So it's an exciting time for me.
How do you feel about, well, what do you think will be the most challenging thing in being in that role?
People are always challenging. Children you can deal with. Parents, staff, might be the challenge. I think over the course of my years working with parents, sometimes they can be very challenging. They can be super supportive or a pain in the neck. Either way, I think I feel up to the challenge, and I will certainly have the support of my boss. My new boss will help me navigate that. So I'm excited.
So, Miss Loretta, you've been with this journey from the beginning, and what is your end and where's your end point in this journey in getting this project off the ground? Where do you see yourself?
I don't think there is an end because I was there from the beginning. I will always support Alicia in her new role as I can. My vision and all the work that I've done will come through in the process and through Alicia as well. I'm certain that I will be doing something with hope
Mhm.
with my experience and background. Not sure how that's going to align itself, but I'm available.
Mhm.
And it is my desire that the center brings not only opportunity to children, but for those entrepreneurs who will start where we are and one day have their own building with their own set of 40 kids and reaching their big dream.
Yeah, we want to talk more in depth, in detail about what our vision is for this center. But I think we have to, we want to bring you guys back on when we're close to that point and when we've sat down. For the folks that are listening, we are looking again to make the center a place where people who are, it's a lab, it's a learning lab. And essentially, it's going to still operate as a childcare center, but we're looking to target folks who are looking to start their own center. And we're going to use Miss Alicia, we're going to use Miss Loretta as resources to help train up individuals in the classroom to undertake the journey that you guys have taken so that folks can be set up for success so that when they start their process and they start their journey and they launch their childcare center, whether it's a family childcare or whether it's a center, that they are in the best possible position to do so. So as we're getting close to the end, and again, I think we've kind of integrated a lot of this into our conversation already, but I'm going to still ask about the role of coaching and mentorship, because again, when we set up Legacy Learning Lab, it is going to be built around mentorship and that level of support. So can you talk about why that was critical for you all during this process? And did you feel properly supported and mentored in this journey?
I know for me, right from the beginning, LISC did all they could to support us in this process. We specifically worked with Liz and Kadeem, and if something was left, they made sure it went right. They were always available for questions if something wasn't turned in how they needed it. You know, it wasn't a bad thing. They were just like, nope, do it this way, get it to us. And that was helpful for us. And their office hours to go on those calls weekly to hear what other people were going through. It was like a support group, you know, because you were there like, oh, this is not only me, but this person is experiencing that. And even in some cases, you heard about things that you could prevent on your end because they were going through it and you didn't do it that way. You had the right way to do it. So I would say that the support from Liz, the mentoring, the coaching was essential. I mean, you couldn't do it without them, and very supportive. They came to see our center very early on, and they said at that point, that this is going to be the flagship. This is what we want this to look like and to be like. And we will circle back to you all when this is completed because we want other people to see what you all have done here and be able to model it. And we were honored by that. You know, they didn't have to say those nice words to us, but we were also committed to ensuring that we followed not only what you said, but we followed the guidelines to make sure our center happened.
And Alicia, I'm going to give you the last minute to kind of talk about mentoring and coaching, especially for you who will be stepping into a leadership position.
Absolutely. The mentorship will be critical. And I know one piece that was super eye-opening for me was when you sat down with us and went over the budget. Like we had our own thoughts about the profitability at the onset, but there were certainly things that we did not take into account. So definitely having a mentor and a coach is essential, so you can avoid those pitfalls or things that you don't think about.
Yeah, I know the budget is one of the things that a lot of people don't consider a budget of a childcare center. And again, we're going to talk about all of these. We're hoping to have you ladies back, especially when we get close to launching Legacy Learning Lab and to talk more in detail about what that process is going to be. But again, thank you so very much, Loretta and Alicia, first and foremost, for coming here and being here with us and just sharing your journey with us, but also for undertaking this really important work in the city. Any final things that you would like to say? You've got probably about like 30 seconds.
I'll never
for
forget
having
the
us.
day. Thank you for having us. And I'll never forget the day that you said you were operating a plane without any wings. That was so eye-opening. I said, oh my, but we got it together.
You guys certainly did. And again, Legacy Learning Lab, tell us again where it's located.
392 Legion Avenue in New Haven.
Yes, and we're hoping to have this organization, this childcare center launched, hopefully January next year, and to get everything done. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, ladies.
Bye.
You are listening to Inside Voices on